say my hometown of Sacramento.
Uh-huh.
It was originally known as like the city of trees, so there's a lot of historic and mature trees there. And I'll say like usually when I go home for like Thanksgiving time, it's really beautiful to see all the changing colors in the leaves and like down the street. So that kind of reminds me of like home and just I feel like down here in Southern California, you really don't get that.
Thanks for sharing. That sounds like a beautiful sight. Randy? Randy Reyes, you might have you know, you might want to be texting that in the chat or come off mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
For me, it's when I went to Laguna Beach over the summer, specifically like the Thousand Step Beach, and I just remember like the golden hour, and then like the birds were flying around. It was really nice.
Thank you for sharing, Randy. We'll go to you, Jorge.
The first place that I thought of was actually where we went last week for field trip week. We went and checked out the Azusa Ridgeline. There was a part just above the Vasquez Ranch called Chema's Landing. It was really nice getting to see the mountains that I've been seeing since I was little because I grew up in Glendora. So seeing it from the adverse perspective was really fun.
Nice. Thank you for sharing, Jorge. And folks who need to write their responses in the chat, feel free to get started on that, and I'll read them as folks are sharing. Let's go to
You go next. Jorge Montiel.
yes.
Okay. For me, it was this time when I went to the Salk Institute in San Diego. The whole the whole space, it's a vibe like the icebreaker says, right? And even when you get into the area, it's a vibe, and the sunset. Um, it was hitting exactly at the point where when you can see the two buildings dividing into, or the whole area dividing into two. And I think it was a great or like I felt like it was a great experience, and the whole area provide that experience for me, I would say.
Thank you for sharing, Jorge. Let's go to you, Dre, and then we'll go to Maya.
Quick question. It doesn't have to be somewhere like we visited, right?
Surprise me.
Okay, because there's this bridge in Vietnam called I think it's like the Hands of God, and it's an incredibly huge bridge, and right next to it is this giant statue of two hands, and they're made out of gold, or they look like they're made out of gold. And it's like so surreal, and it's on my bucket list to visit someday. And it just looks like when I've seen pictures of it, when the sun comes up or the sun comes down, the way it hits the light hits the hands, it looks so majestic, and it just looks like an experience I definitely want to have one day.
Indeed, indeed. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing that story when you get a chance to visit. Let's go to you, Maya.
Um, the memory that comes to mind is I was visiting my friend in Boston, and we had a day trip to Provincetown, Massachusetts, and we rented some bikes and we're going around, and I just felt like it was a really special moment. Like nothing else mattered. I wasn't stressed about anything. I was just taking in the scenery, and it was really great.
Nice, nice. Thanks for sharing, Maya. I'm gonna go to the chat and read the few responses we have there so far. Claudia responds, an experience that I had was when I went to Yosemite for the first time. I was done with one of the hikes for the day, and you felt the fresh air and the waterfall in the background and the taste of the fresh cold water. Yeah, that sounds really amazing. Especially like after, like a hike or, a run, and then you get that coolness of the air. It's like nature's refreshing you from the experience. Once you get to the top of a mountain or end a task and hiking it, it always feels better than the journey for sure. It makes the journey worth it. I have Andres here in the chat for a unique experience in Los Angeles that embodies high cities. Consider Griffith Observatory at sunset. The view of the city combined with the colors of the sky creates a distinct moment that feels truly singular. It's perfect blend of nature and urban landscape, providing an ultimate sense of connection to the place. And also there's a great hiking spot there with a nice view. Thank you. It's definitely on the bucket list for me to do. I've driven up there, but I haven't really explored the Griffith Observatory as much as I would have liked so far. Thank you for that, Andres. Zuriel in the chat. An experience that I've had was when I went to Corona del Mar over the summer. There was a really beautiful sunset, and being next to the bonfire with my friends made the scene even better. Thank you so much for sharing, Zuriel. Let's go to you, Jamie, and then we'll go to Andre.
I would say my place that I think of is that over the winter break I was able to go to the Philippines, and I like rarely go to the Philippines, so every time I go I like cherish it. But I love when every time I go to the Philippines I visit my grandma's farm, and it's just so sweet, and like I just want to like live it in every time I go.
Thank you for sharing. Andre?
I guess the place for me was I went to Hawaii over the summer, and in Maui. I forgot the town that it was called, but it recently got burnt down due to some fires. But when I visited over the summer, I got to go to this beach, and when I went to this beach, a bunch of town folks and even the hotels around the area, they all went to the beach and kind of paid homage to all the families that were lost in the fires, and just seeing that community and all the people gathering into one beach just kind of like, I guess, hit something in me. So that was pretty cool.
Yes, thank you for sharing that, Andre. It was so devastating seeing that happen in Hawaii not too long ago. But yes, in those hard moments of tragedy, it's always moving to see how community comes together to rebuild, to grieve, and to support those that are still here, right? So yeah, thank you again for sharing that. Let's go to you, Sergio, and then Rocio.
Hello. I would say um, a landscape that's kind of like similar to what he explained is there's like a meadow in Sequoia. It's pretty close. Like it's a meadow in a valley, and you can see like the mountains around the meadow. So I would say that's a space for me.
What are some colors there? Like I'm like I know like in my head I'm starting to make up some beautiful things, but like what are you seeing in the meadow? What's happening there?
I mean, I just
How are your senses being engaged?
I think it's more like the visual. It just looks kind of like the tall grasses and mix them with like some flowers, and in the backdrop, the background is like the valley and the rocks. So it's like it's open, but um, but you can still see like maybe through the valley and how open it is, and like where it's mostly like foresty, but there's like a large open area. I think looks pretty cool.
Nice, nice. Thank you for sharing that. Let's go to you, Rocio. All right, in the chat, A unique experience is in Torrey Pines. Oh my gosh, one of the most beautiful beaches ever. There's a hiking trail that goes around a hill and down to the beach. The view of the top of the hill is beautiful and breathtaking. Definitely one of my favorite spots to hike and to take in the view with the end reward of resting on the beach by the end. You know, there's a beach by Torrey Pines. I can't really figure out how to get to it. I haven't been there since I went there the first time, but it was like at night and it was like a full moon too. But I remember walking across like train tracks to get there, and it was like under a bridge, and then we were at the beach. But it was so freaking beautiful. But yeah, San Diego, I'm from San Diego, born and raised, all the San Diegos in the house, whoop, whoop. Uh, but we have some of the most beautiful beaches in the world. And it's funny, like growing up there, because you know, you think all the beaches in the world are like the same, are made equal. And you know, coming up here to LA, you know, I found out that that wasn't the case. But there's some nice beaches up here. But yeah, you know, San Diego has some very beautiful beaches. Thank you for sharing. Let's go to Jasmine and then we'll go to Issy. Jasmine, you may be on mute. Or feel free to write your response in the chat. Issy, we can go to you.
Hi, sorry, I'm just actually running into my house. Can you give me 5 minutes?
Yes, no worries. Let's go to you,
Sorry.
Patty. Patty Moreno. While we're waiting for folks to come off mute, I'm gonna read Isaac's response in the chat. I recently went to Mexico City and I got to eat in a cave restaurant by the pyramids. It was such a cool experience and the food was amazing. I got some chilaquiles and they were bomb. Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. I definitely have to make that trip to Mexico City and see the pyramids. We called on a few people. I'm gonna try my luck again and think that third luck is the charm, the third time's the charm. Let's go to Jonathan Reyes and then we'll go to Williams. Jonathan Reyes, you might be on mute. I think we lost Jonathan Reyes. Let's go to you, Williams.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Jonathan messaged me that his PC froze, so he has to really log in.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. But I guess one experience that like stands out to me was the Getty Villa when I went to go visit it. The first time like I experienced that garden, it was kind of like mesmerizing. Just how like symmetrical and like clean, green everything was. It was like nothing like I experienced like in LA before. So I guess that's my experience.
Nice, nice. Thank you for sharing. And yes, Jonathan, feel free to jump in. I know you had some tech issues.
I guess one like it's not really like a place. Well, I guess it is, but driving down like PCH like at nighttime, it's just like kind of surreal. Everything's like all hilly and stuff. And then like when it's dark and it's all foggy, it's like a pretty cool and unique area, I think.
Yeah, that marine layer gets to kick it in, huh? Thank you for sharing. Jasmine, are you ready to jump in?
Yes, sorry, I apologize. I was in the restroom.
No worries.
But an experience that reminds me of this was probably last semester when my professor Muriel took us to Mount Bodley. It was really like the whole experience was really nice. It was I hadn't been to like a waterfall or like a river like that. So it was definitely mesmerizing getting to see like nature itself.
Thank you for sharing, Jasmine. Let's go to Carla and then Manuel.
Yeah, this is such a hard question for me because there's a few that comes to mind. But if I had to choose one, I would pick a moment where me and my husband would catch a sunrise. And I pick sunrise specifically. There's this a time when we went to Utah and Bryce Canyon National Park. And we were looking at the amphitheater, the colors of the totem, and just the change of the sky and the scenery over the 2 minutes that I know sunrise, it's a little bit hard to get to. So, the idea of getting there early just to catch that like 3 minutes of moment to start your day is such an amazing experience, I would say.
Indeed, really trying to chase those sunrises or sunsets. It's always a journey. Last summer, I had a chance to go to the Grand Canyon, and I got up real early so that I could like drive into the park, because I'm not sure if you all have went, but the Grand Canyon's a massive, like, I don't know, site, I guess you can call it. But there's different experiences that you can have within the park, and you can drive probably like hours within the park and still haven't like experienced the whole thing. But I got up really early to go to Desert Point, which was like,
let me see that he called me, then I'll go.
Someone probably needs to go on mute. But yeah, all the way out to Desert Point. I didn't make it to Desert Point before the sun rose, but it was still beautiful where I was at, because they have all of these different like I forgot what they called them, but it's like viewpoints in the park. And overlooks. They have the overlooks. And so those overlooks, I was able to like stop and see the sunrise before I got to Desert Point, Desert View. But Desert View, oh my gosh, it was so amazing. And it was, the sun was just rising, but the beautiful part about that is you can see the Colorado River. And that was something that I really wanted to see, is the Colorado River going through the Grand Canyon. So it was beautiful to see the sunrise in that. But yeah, chasing those sunsets and those sunrises are always great. Thank you for sharing, Carla. Manuel?
Yeah, so for me, place would be like I go to like Will Rogers Beach. It's a little bit above like Santa Monica. That to me is like one of those places that has that like experience. Like I just sit down and I just love the noise of the ocean, especially when it's like sunset. It's just like super relaxing. I can just forget about everything and then just like really enjoy it. And it gives me a feeling of like calm, I guess, after like just like a day. And if I'm just tired, like that to me is like the place where I get that quality of like experience.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing. I see Philip has shared in the chat. I love the stretch of the LA River in Frogtown. It's part of the Glendale Narrows, one of the few places in the river where there is a soft bottom. So there are a bunch of islands with beautiful trees. On the right bank, south side, there are a number of small businesses with storefronts along the bike pedestrian path. You can get coffee, go to a bakery, grab a glass of wine, rent a bike to ride along the path, or even rent a canoe to paddle in the river. It's amazing already. And you can close your eyes and picture how beautiful it could be with some renovation. Also, quick shout out to Little Italy in San Diego. Love the walkability with these funky little restaurants, stores, cafes, nice spots full of friendly people within a few square blocks. Yes, indeed. And also, San Diego has some of the best food. Like the restaurants there are really good. So yeah, Little Italy is definitely one of those spots you want to go to if you want to get some good food. I see Nestor's in the chat as well. Thank you all for responding in the chat. I went to this park off the coast of San Pedro called the Korean Friendship Bell. It's on a hilltop and you can see the ocean, hear the waves, and all the way from up there. The park has a Korean temple and it has a peaceful vibe to it. I usually like to sit and relax and watch the sunset. You know, I've been to that park before and it's so, I don't know how to describe it. It feels like it's where the earth like curves. I don't know how to describe it. It feels like you're seeing the earth curve right there. It's like you're just looking into the abyss of the ocean and like space at the same time. I don't know. But that part gives me that vibe. I haven't been there at night, but I feel like at night it's intense. I feel like you could feel the intensity of it. And I heard that there's like, well, we won't get into that. But yeah, really, really interesting stuff at that park. Let's see. It's trippy, right? Okay, yeah, I thought so. Okay, I'm not the only one. Patty, last summer I visited Guanajuato in Mexico, and it was beautiful because the town was different than the towns I'm used to when I visit Mexico. We actually experienced a storm and the street got flooded within minutes. And just experiencing the flood and seeing the water run down the street seemed like it came out of a movie. We got soaked up to our calves and we took it as a part of the adventure. While being out there, it definitely was a memorable experience. You know what's so funny about that? My friend recently went to Mexico and he was like posting pictures of his trip, and it just was really crazy rain. And they had the suitcase on top of the car and it was just pouring down rain. And it got flooded just like you described. And within like the rest of his trip, it was beautiful. I mean, the pictures that they posted were just remarkable. But that was intense to see those pictures. I was like, safe travels, man, you know? But it's so crazy how weather can be so intense and then turn into beauty. And like you said, sometimes you just got to take it all as a part of the experience. Definitely. Thanks for sharing. All right, well, we'll go ahead and end the share outs there unless someone has a burning share out that they wanted to share. But we'll go ahead and move on for the sake of time. Right now, we're going to get into this video. It's really talking about urban planning tools, really understanding the context of your project within planning, right? There's different scales of your project that it can be engaging, you know, let's say your region or your city or your community on, right? So this video is going to talk about concepts for sustainable design as well as the scale of your project, right? And so I want you all to be thinking about what your key takeaways are from this video. And after this video, we'll take some time to respond to some questions, and then we'll do a brief share out from those questions. So after this video, we'll take about 10 to 15 minutes to respond to those questions, and then we'll come back to share, okay? So get ready. I need to make sure.
So welcome to Chapter 4. In this chapter, we're going to look at the American Society for Landscape Architects Toolkit for Socially Sustainable Planning. Just to explain who ASLA is, if you're not familiar, it's the professional organization for landscape architects in the United States. It was founded more than 122 years ago, and it provides its members with continuing education, resources, advocacy, thought leadership, and many other services. So landscape architecture as a profession has always included a concern for social well-being. Frederick Law Olmsted was early on an advocate of parks as a way to provide benefit for everybody in the community and to be a democratic force, not just for the wealthy few. But exactly how a design space impacts how people interact with it and each other is something that's getting a lot more attention in the field now. It wasn't necessarily the focus early on. ASLA's definition of social sustainability is, and I quote, the development of resilient communities that meet residents' health and social needs over the long term. In a socially sustainable community, residents are empowered, have equal access to green, healthy spaces, can choose among multiple transportation options, and enjoy a high quality of life. So let's have a look at ASLA's toolkits for sustainability. Landscape architects work at all scales, and so these kits provide different tools for each of those scales. These are free and available at asla.org. For each of these, I'm going to give you a real-life example of a space at that scale and some examples of the tools provided by ASLA. Let's look at the regional planning scale. This can be one of many things, a collection of towns, a tri-state area, or even a larger scale. At the regional scale, local governments need to have a community-centered framework to implement good practices that connect communities and also protects cultural and social assets like historic landscapes or other identities that foster connection to place. So here's a great example. This is again from my hometown on the Ohio River on the Indiana side. This infrastructure has been absolutely transformative for recreation in the Louisville metropolitan area, and it's a catalyst for other projects. So many other great things have grown out of this. It connects a pedestrian bike bridge across the Ohio River and has revolutionized safe bicycling in the area, both for commuters and sports people. It makes it safe and pleasurable to cross the mile-wide Ohio River. It also connects two states, Indiana and Kentucky. So here's some of the tools that ASLA suggests for regional social sustainability. And this section focuses quite a lot on air quality benchmarking, but also health metrics like diabetes, obesity, food access, and so on. Now let's look at the city planning scale. So I referenced Bogota's city planning before. As I mentioned, they're leading the way, along with other Colombian cities, in establishing that a cycling network and strong public spaces have multiple benefits. They reduce air pollution, they increase social interaction, they reduce crime, they facilitate transit, and they provide economic opportunity. So infrastructure upgrades like what took place here can absolutely transform a city's social sustainability. So you can see, in addition to improving transportation, they also improved utilities, put in a rapid bus system. And one of the things that's gone along with this, without any additional policing measures, is that violent deaths have decreased by more than 40%. That's a pretty incredible statistic if you think about it. So here are some resources that look at transportation alternatives to private cars. Also, the National Park Service's Community Toolbox is a terrific roadmap for how to build effective communication with the community in planning and design. Then looking a little bit closer, zooming in at the neighborhood scale. So there's a great emphasis on communities having healthier and more active lives because, of course, that's connected to enjoyability, quality of life, quality of community, quality of place, health, social connections, all kinds of things. There's so many factors that feed into people having healthier, more active lives. It's economically healthy because there's fewer days lost to illness off the job. Healthy cities and communities are ones that offer their residents a range of transport, recreation, and housing options. So they're diverse in terms of the amenities that they offer, and they all contribute to longer, healthier lives. So we referenced this project before with Jan Gehl. Just as the Augustenburg case study showed that the tendency to flood could actually be turned into an advantage, Jan Gehl and his team, as you recall, looked at informal settlements and they celebrate and elevate their sometimes chaotic, but always dense, small scale, and very livable nature as highly active community spaces. So instead of proposing that they be changed to be more like typical, formal, traditional planned housing, he advocates to inventory and elevate their strengths while improving things like recreation, transport, and utilities. Neighborhood scale social sustainability stretches across health, walkability, things like bicycle level of service, which is a nationally used metric for on-road cyclist comfort, which takes into account things like speed limit, width, existence of bike lane, and so on in determining how good a street is for cycles. It's a great answer to city or community agencies creating inadequate and unsafe bicycle infrastructure. We've all seen those painted lanes that in fact create more likelihood of traffic violence than it reduces. Walk score, of course, is also a really critical factor in determining quality of life in a neighborhood. Then look at landscape or site scale, public squares, small parks, common spaces in a residential or retail development. So we're going down to a much smaller site. This is a great little park in a former brownfield remediation in Portland. It was in a high-needs neighborhood, a community-driven process, years in the making. It also eliminates a harmful site in addition to adding a park. It includes trails, a great playground, lots of covered seating to accommodate those really rainy Portland days, which there's a lot of. Prior to its acquisition, it was a landfill. It was permanently closed in 1990, and it was taken over by the Department of Environmental Quality. Parks and Rec purchased the property and brought in a master plan in 2009. It wasn't opened until 2018. These things do take a long time. It's $12 million price tag, and it completely transformed the area. It won an Oregon Brownfields Redevelopment Award in 2018, and it is a huge asset for a community that didn't previously have a park and is one of Portland's most diverse neighborhoods. So these tools allow you to address accessibility, a very complex subject because there are so many kinds of disabilities, both visible and invisible. SITES is a rating system that guides and evaluates and certifies a project's sustainability, and it also helps implement nature-based solutions. So it's a really fantastic initiative. And it also protects biodiversity, mitigates climate change, conserves resources, and improves public health. So now that we've reviewed these tools, let's move on to see how two cities dealt with incredible catastrophes and how they were able to build resilience and come back better.
All right, so now we're gonna spend some time responding to the video. The questions that you want to ask are the questions you'll be responding to are: what were Frederick Law's Olmsted's intentions behind development of public parks? How does the American Society of Landscape Architects define social sustainability? What are the 3 scales of planning discussed in the video? Provide an example for each of the 3 scales of planning. Identify the ASL recommendations for each scale and explain why you find these examples compelling. So we'll take about 15 minutes to do this, and we'll come back at 6:55. Go ahead. These questions are available on Canvas, and the video is also available on Canvas. So make sure, feel free to use the Canvas link to access the video and lecture.
It looks like the Canvas page is still unpublished for this class session.
Let me go ahead and fix that right quick. Stop share. All right, go ahead and refresh your pages. It should be available now. Right, so let's get working on that, and then we'll be back around 6:55. All right, we should be starting to come back now. Who's feeling the spooky vibes? Okay, okay. We are into Halloween season now. All right.
Sorry, Professor. I wanted to ask you, where can we find the video? I was looking for it, but I couldn't find it.
Okay, my apologies. I should have
No,
put it in
no.
the chat. But it's in the lecture on slide 4.
Oh, I see. Okay. Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right. So we'll go ahead and do a few share outs before we go on to our first our break. Let's see. So we have a few questions to respond to. What were Frederick Law Olmsted's intentions behind development of parks?
Professor, can I respond kind of
Yes.
holistically? Because I really gravitated to this video because I think a lot of us landscape architect students are in studio and are specifically doing the exact same thing right now. And this is such a helpful video because I myself was like even having some questions earlier with my group mates, like what are some standards of sustainability? So thank you so much for aligning with what we're learning so far in studio. But I kind of wanted to just answer like an overview of like what how I took on the videos that Olmsted started a park wanting everybody to use this park as a sign of health and something that is not just the wealthy to use. And with that being said, expanding the scales of planning, like whether it's regional, city, neighborhood, or even the site scale, and uncovering all of the research behind that, and just from the expansion and then pinpointing to the actual site. And it just goes back to what Olmsted said, is that, that filter of like, are we actually designing our sites into so that everyone can use it? And to just kind of summarize what I want to say so much more, but I know I'm the first one sharing.
Yes, no, that's spot on, Carla. It's really important to be critical about those things when you're building out your site designs and thinking through what needs to exist there, right? You need to have that context of history. You need to understand how stakeholders have experienced the site differently, right? And you also need to understand the scale of that, right? Like what level of entry are you approaching this assignment from, or this project from? Is this a regional scale project? Because again, depending on the scale of it, it also factors in which stakeholders need to be engaged, right? It may be a whole different set of stakeholders if this is a regional thing, because it's not just with local municipalities, for example, maybe with the state. So yes, spot on to that. And then just the intention around who is the site being built for. a lot of times that is omitted, right? Especially when we're talking about underserved demographics and population. So really having that as a front of mind when you're thinking through how the site will be used, who will have access to the site, those are super critical considerations. So no, thank you for sharing that, Carla. Anybody else want to share anything related to that? What were Frederick Law Olmsted's intentions behind developing parks, and why does that resonate with you? Or does it not resonate with you?
Professor,
Manuel?
if I could just give a bit. Yeah, I mean, like how like Carla basically gave like a really good answer. So but to me, yeah, it resonates to me a lot too, because I think for like if you look at history, like a lot of gardens were usually made by these like really important people, and it was just like private spaces for themselves. And it's really not till like, I mean, it's not just Olmsted, but he kind of did it like more famously, I guess, but to create these spaces for everybody to enjoy. And I feel like even now there's a lot of communities that don't have that. And so to me it resonates because it's still true to this day. Like what Olmsted was trying to push back then is like it's still relevant. It's still those problems still exist, and so his intentions to like make it a like a shared space for everybody. It just to me was like really cool to interesting to learn about, because that still exists today. Like there's people don't have those spaces always, especially in Southern California.
They have to be made, they have to be made. And that's something to keep in mind, because if it's not built with intention, it just won't exist, right? So thank you so much for speaking to that, Manuel. Let's go to question number 2. How does the American Society of Landscape Architects define social sustainability? Who wants to jump in there and answer this one?
I can do this one.
Awesome.
It is social sustainability is the development of resilient communities that meet residents' health and social needs over the long term.
That over the long term is definitely the operative word in this. And I think it really fits in perfectly with landscape architecture, because a lot of the projects that you all will be a part of, them in themselves have a lifespan, right? The vision of a landscape evolves over time. So in your plans, you're going to be thinking about the maintenance cycle of your project, right? That's already built in. And so really thinking about the longevity of a project and the long-term impact it'll have on a community is something that should go hand in hand with the way that you're thinking of your projects anyway, right? Certain blooms won't happen for like the first season, right? And so you'll have to communicate that. Sometimes you'll have landscape intentions that are communicating privacy, right? The shrubs that are being built maybe for privacy, and that the plant grows 2 feet a year. So you're telling your client this is the vision for the long term. That also builds into the community aspect of it as well. What is the long-term longevity of your projects? How does this communicate around the health needs of the community over the long term, right? When we're talking about the social determinants of health, and how are you effectively drawing the line between these deliverables that your project has and these intentions, right? So you really want to be able to communicate that effectively in using tools like how, the ASLA defines social sustainability and connecting the dots to your project, identifying the relationship between your project and the social determinants of health and communicating that language in your project. Those things are really important to do. And they're definitely effective ways to communicate to your stakeholder groups. Let's go to question number 3. Who wants to jump in there and answer question number 3? What are the 3 scales of planning discussed in the video?
I can answer that. There's regional planning, city planning, and neighborhood planning.
Awesome, awesome. Which one stood out the most to you and why?
For me personally, I think neighborhood planning is important. Well, they're all important, but I feel most connected to neighborhood planning because I feel like it's the easiest for us all to get involved with because it's on a more local level, and involves us communicating with our neighbors and community.
Indeed. And what stood out in the example provided in the video related to neighborhood planning for you?
I only got as far as regional planning on that one. I'm still answering the question, sorry.
No worries. Do you want to jump in on regional planning?
Sure. They were talking about the Ohio River Greenway and how it connects communities along the river together. And then I was just taking note of some of the suggested tools they talked about, like air quality index, health data, livable communities toolkits, etc.
And all of those components are important to factor in, especially if you have a project that can communicate to those intentions, right? Because when you're talking about the regional scale, you're talking about compliance, you're talking about different legislative requirements, right? And so being able to communicate how your project is addressing a local need in relation to air pollution, but again, then connecting that to, let's say, the requirements in that region related to it, those ways of communicating to those 2 stakeholder groups, the community who's living through this, harmful experience, as well as the legislators who are trying to facilitate laws related to or compliance related to those experiences, right? And your landscape project is an intervention of sorts to that. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, Maya. So there are 2 more examples provided in the video related to the scales of planning. I would love to hear those from you all. There was city planning and neighborhood planning. Who wants to go for city planning? Who would like to speak to city planning?
You can go, it's fine. I'll go after you.
Oh no, you can go, George. Go for it.
Okay. For me, I didn't fully understand the video. I was trying to fully understand it, but for me, I would say, or in my experience, city planning has to be a little more related with the regulations and what's allowed and what is not in the city. For example, if you're planning to develop a neighborhood, this new neighborhood, right off the 5, city planning would include, which one would be which spaces would be residential, which spaces would be commercial, and then if we want to go a little more specific, which places are allowed to have these signs or these commercial signs, and which spaces are not allowed to have a sign, right? Or different things. And if we talk about residential, which spaces are allowed to have an ADU, right? But that's what I have on my mind when I hear city planning, like all those regulations, right? Where are you allowed to build? How tall can your house be? How many floors? How many stories, right?
Yeah, you're spot on in relation to that. What I would say is that the sustainability component is another layer on top of that, right? So you have the city planning requirements, right? Every jurisdiction has the requirements that you have to be in compliance of, the zoning restrictions, the city ordinance, etc. But in addition to that, because some of those regulations may not have sustainable values, right? They may not be considerate of the most historically harmed communities. They may not be considerate of economic considerations, right? And so the sustainability consideration is another layer on top of that. So after you're in compliance with those things, here are some other factors that you may want to consider related to sustainability, right? Because you can't get around compliance with those city regulation components, right? When you're talking about city zoning, and those are important, right? And those are going to be built into your project. But what sometimes happens is those regulations are systems thinking, right? They're compliance thinking. They're not necessarily always people thinking, not always environmental thinking. Sometimes, right, when you're talking about CEQA compliance, right, that may be consideration. But there are also, the video was talking about, or other special cultural identities. A lot of times you have factors of like Native American engagement, right? So those are more like sustainability factors in regards to how you're engaging the social context, the environmental context, and even like the economic considerations. Those are, again, another layer of considerations for your
I
project,
see. I see.
not replacing at all.
Mm. And it could also be, for example, when you're planning for, and this is talking about sustainability, right? When you're planning to do a small remodelation on that on a street, I feel like the way to achieve different levels of how's it different levels like and hey, superior, conserving, and I think the one on top is restorative. Um, on sustainability, not having only that part where you um let or you guide things to be the way they were, but maybe what you're doing, you can find a way to do it better and to help the community, or what you're doing, you might be able to find a way to help to solve an issue, right? To help to improve, instead of just saying like, okay, we're gonna fix this on the street and then we're gonna patch it and that's it, like we did what we needed to do. No, maybe like you can find a way to make it better, right? To make it a little better.
Sustainable, you may want to even consider who's contracted for that work, right? There's different ways to incorporate like sustainability factors into the project completion. And that's in your role as a designer, you want to make sure, like, let's say if you're on a city project, that you say, hey, have we engaged the community in relation to this project? Have we gotten insight in relation to their needs? Or maybe other hotspots of challenges that, like if there's potholes, do we know where all the potholes in this community are? Have we, gotten a survey out there to the community? So there's different things that you can employ. And so, for example, in this video, they were giving you different considerations that you can make at different scales, right? Conversations you want to have, and like, have you talked to the community? Are you engaging this group, right? So those sustainability considerations are really, really important. And those oftentimes are in addition to, you may be in a room where, let's say, folks didn't have this insight, right, around sustainability factors. So they're really just trying to, like you said, complete the task, but slowing it down, asking questions, looking at, if we're going to do this for the whole city, which communities should be prioritized, right? How do you identify prioritization? Things of that nature. So yeah, thank you so much for that question. And does that help you better understand how to think of this, how we're applying it for sustainability? Thumbs up. Perfect. I think Isaac was gonna ask or answer or respond.
I was gonna answer, what was it, the city level, but I do have a question about Bogota. I'm wondering how 40% of crime was reduced. Is that because there's more traffic, like more public spaces, or why is it so drastic as far as the percentage of crime reduced?
That's a really good question that I don't have the answer to. But a lot of times what happens is when you're introducing an intervention, it can create a situation where it alleviates, a frustration or a concern, right? Like if it's economic opportunity, if you create more economic opportunity, then you'll have less folks participating in alternative uh, sources of income, right? So thinking of causality, but that oftentimes isn't something that, like, let's say I can answer per se. That probably is a question directly for the people who are a part of that project. But I do think that your projects will create a conversation, around after the introduction of our project, this is the outcome, right? It may not always be able to prove causality, but it is being able to say, let's say after 5 years of implementing a project, we were able to assess the same areas that we looked at before we started the project. And these are the ways that those areas were impacted over this 5-year period of time in this same area.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I mean, it's interesting. Right.
It's definitely interesting. Let's see. Philip is in the, oh wait, Carlos said something about the Bogota violent deaths as well. Yes, and Philip mentions there are a bunch of recent studies showing that landscaping and trees in urban areas decrease crime. Maybe the vegetation has a calming effect. All right, so with that being said, let's go ahead and go on a break. We'll take our 5-minute break and then we'll come back and finish our collective impact conversation. We'll be back at 7:22.
Professor, I have one question. I'm sorry, I might not. I'm still trying to understand how the assignments work. But I see that it's a lecture, collective impact, constant communication, and mutual reinforcing activities, right?
Yes.
And that's 25 points. But I see the details and includes the class video of reflection. Is that the only thing we need to answer, or do we need to answer like everything there, the mutual reinforcing activities and the constant communication, or just the class video reflection? What do we need to answer here on these activities? Sorry.
Yeah, so for each lecture, there's a series of questions, and maybe in response to a video or a conversation we're having in the class. All of those questions need to be answered and submitted onto that link. So you can, just respond to those questions and submit it with that link, the lecture link. Yes, but they're available on the lecture as well as on the file that you're supposed to submit it in. If you see it, the questions are there as well.
Okay.
On Canvas.
Okay. And then we're submitting it through Canvas or through?
Yes, Canvas.
Sounds good. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Perfect, no problem. All right, coming back. All right, so we should be coming back. Give me a thumbs up if you are back with me. I see a few folks with their thumbs up. All right, so we are getting back into the collective impact conversation. Last week, we discussed common agenda and shared measurement. We discussed this in context of a food policy council, and that was a really great exercise. We're going to continue that activity, looking at continuous communication, which is developing trust among nonprofits, corporations, residents, government agencies, and participants in relation to regular meetings to build up enough experiences with each other to recognize and appreciate the common motivation behind the projects. We'll also be talking about mutual reinforcing activities, which really is about working with a diverse group of people, but not by requiring all participants to do the same thing, but encourage each participant to undertake a specific set of activities that they are good at or that they're skilled at, are experts in, and coordinating those actions across the project. So today, we're going to continue our work in looking at how projects can become, again, interventions of addressing, let's say, responding to a set of tools like ASLA sustainability context factors, and then also examples of addressing interventions related to social determinants of health. Again, you want to use these common language frameworks to help communicate across stakeholder groups, as well as identify key points that your project will intervene in. So be mindful of that as well. Today, we're going to do another case study activity. We'll look at a project in South Africa, Alaska, South Africa. How about that? There's an Alaska in South Africa. And we're going to be talking about the way that this organization facilitates those mutual reinforcing activities, as well as constant communication for this project. So let's go ahead and get into it.
To what extent is the theory of collaborative and participatory design, as it is taught in the Honours Architecture program at the University of Pretoria, applicable to the real-world context of Alaska, a South African informal settlement? Let us briefly unpack this statement. We as students of architecture within the institution of the University of Pretoria have been equipped with a scope of knowledge that should allow us to address issues with design-related outcomes. Within the academic institution, design is thought of and taught in many different ways. Artistic, participatory, institutional, and pragmatic broadly outline 4 paradigms of design within our institution. We consider participatory as a well-suited design toolkit, considering the specific informal context and focus of coursework. Within participation, there are further theoretical standpoints, loosely described as partial participation, transformative participation, and full participation. Based on the works of Nabil Hamdi as the primary resource of the Honours Year program, we consider transformative participation to best engage with the given context. On the other side, the community, the context in which design must fall, contains a knowledge base that impacts design significantly. The social structure, how design inputs or interference may be received. Context, an understanding of place, of culture or religion. Tacit knowledge, as displayed in the vernacular of tangible or intangible. And networks, where the design and design process must fit within, such as understanding leadership structure, economic dependencies, and the connection of sites to the greater urban networks. It is at this point where the two knowledge bases meet, both coming in with a different set of skills. How then can we begin to connect, integrate, and mediate these two knowledge bases to generate design, process, and outcome? The investigation is then towards a methodology that best encompasses these knowledges into a design. Alaska is situated east of Pretoria in the Gauteng province of South Africa. The informal settlement stretches in a linear fashion along the mountainside, constrained by formal development on the one side and steep topography on the other. Our chosen site to investigate is at the end of the formal road, at the cul-de-sac. Our initial site exploration method was to immerse ourselves in the context and become familiar to the people. Although equipped with introductory games, as literature suggested, we quickly found it was more effective to connect on a social level, being friendly and interested in the everyday doings of the people we met. Through this process, we were introduced to many key role players, one being the community leader, Skumba. The importance of working through existing networks is highlighted by Hamdi. Skumba had many ideas and could encourage a meaningful dialogue with regards to small change community upgrade. He was able to generate excitement about the project, and we felt for the first time that our experiment may indeed become a product that assists the end user. We had immersed ourselves fairly significantly in both theory and community. However, we were unable to determine through role players within the community what we could potentially build. We found that no one really knew, or had not given it any thought, to what small upgrade could create much benefit. The dialogue constantly returned to the need for water and electricity. To continue our research, we suggested a program, develop around a much-used tap. The tap was identified by us as students based off the expert knowledge taught within academia to assess and highlight key potentials of a site. The single tap point is used by more than 15 households and a couple of businesses, including a taxi vehicle wash. The hope was to create ownership of the upgrade towards the taxi wash members, enabling the facility for taxi business. This, coupled with the upgrading of the area towards a social space and expanded function of the tap, such as washing space. As soon as a tangible outcome was defined, the dialogue became extremely engaging. The role players were able to give significant input into what should happen, and debates between members became good design informants. Discussion with the model and walking through the site with gestures of space were the most effective communication tools. Inspired by the hashtag #FeesMustFall campaign, we were also curious to test the extent of participation using technology, such as social media. This would potentially expand key role players indefinitely, meaning that the location was not a prerequisite to participation. Could this potentially strengthen the coming together of the knowledge bases? Social media produced two major outcomes, one of crowdsourced funding, and the other of on-site participation of the general public. Through funds donated, we sourced local building materials as well as having materials donated by corporate companies. Throughout the building process, the design changed significantly based on material, key role player inputs at the time, skills necessary to build the design, and so on. It then became clear that the greatest co-design tool we had was the unstructured building process with in-the-moment decisions. The Alaska Builds project contained many unknowns that made for a dynamic design approach. There is no single client, no predetermined outcome, no planning regulations, undetermined building labor, no known construction skills, and unknown materials. The design changed as these unknowns presented themselves. For example, a bricklayer came to assist us, so brick became a more viable material choice. The counter where washing would occur was also a much contested decision. The basins acquired, we were told, were not adequate for washing clothes, and the counter height with basins would be too high to place a washing bucket on, in which case the existing tap and ground may be a better design regarding its function. The process was heavily weighted by the availability of materials. Concrete slab was not an option until we were donated enough material to do so. Interestingly, often key role players only made their constraints of design heard once the building had commenced. As an example, we had built a gabion wall in an attempt to reach an aesthetic and use the rocks as free material, but once built, a key role player, who assisted in construction, asked if we could plaster over the whole thing, because instead of making a good wall, we had made a habitat for snakes. The building process lasted 4 weeks, and this is some documentation of that process. So then, to what extent is the theory of participatory and collaborative design applicable to Alaska, the South African informal settlement? If we reflect on the argument outlined, what we discovered is that expert knowledge suitably adapts itself to be more engaged with tacit knowledge. We found our initial bias towards expert knowledge became weighted far more by the on-site tacit experiences. We were able to engage on a tacit level, informed by expert knowledge, because this is the common ground of both knowledge bases. It is apparent that for expert knowledge to engage on a tacit level is more easily achieved than for tacit knowledge to engage at the level of expert knowledge. The theories tested are extremely dependent on the specific context in which they are applied. We found, as opposed to significantly testing the tools provided by the theories, we were rather testing the willingness of the context to engage with these tools. In this regard, the many potential methodologies for application of collaborative theory allows a strong adaptation of method to become best suited to the context in which collaboration may be applied. In other words, the strength of participation theory in the given context was its loosely outlined application, allowing for the method of how it is applied to be defined by the context. In this project, the dependency of tacit knowledge is clear. The balances of knowledge as applied is weighted towards the tacit. However, that tacit knowledge base is far more critical to design than initially presumed. To place expert knowledge within a tacit framework appears to be the strength of the theories of participatory and collaborative design. There is a separation of tacit and expert knowledge bases. However, the theory allows us to begin to merge these two. In retrospect, our methodology became that which significantly engages with tacit knowledge through social interaction, dialogue, and observation. In comparison, this approach is in line and engages with much of what Nabil Hamdi suggests with regard to participatory and collaborative design.
All right, I really, really like that video because I feel it really encompasses a lot of what we've been discussing in this course so far related to collective impact and really leveraging engagement with impacted community members to understand what the best intervention should be. These are academic students, you know, so they're similar to yourselves. And it really does give insight on the important role community engagement, community-centered design has. Right now, we're going to be looking at this video to work through understanding our collective impact components, right? And so, again, going back to this assessment of stakeholders, who's at the table. In this conversation, we have academic institutions, right? We have the University of Pretoria that is providing support. They have students on site, and they also have this added value of academic knowledge. So with that being said, there's multiple stakeholders in this example that we're talking through. So be mindful of that, but we're going to talk about how in this video we're seeing their practices of constant communication.
It's true.
As mutual reinforcing activities, right? So what were the mutual reinforcing activities? How did the stakeholders in the case study coordinate their unique strengths to achieve the shared goals of the initiative? What specific roles or activities did different participants excel at? And how did these contributions complement the efforts of others in the collective impact project? How did the case study ensure that diverse actions of stakeholders remained aligned and coordinated toward a common agenda? And what challenges did the stakeholders face in balancing their independent activities with the need for collaboration? And how were these challenges addressed? Similar to last week, we're going to go ahead and do a breakout group where we discuss these questions. Let's see, I already broke you all out into breakouts. Let's see, options. Yes, we'll do it for 20 minutes. But before I open it up, are there any questions regarding the video or the task at hand?
Yeah, Professor, can I just ask the clarifying question regarding on the video? They talked a lot about expert knowledge and like tacit knowledge. I kind of look it up. Tacit knowledge is it like a common knowledge between like the local residents or the community that you wouldn't have known even if you you would only know if you live there?
Yeah, I mean, tacit knowledge is really knowledge that's hard to communicate. It's not necessarily academic based, it may be experience based. So in this context, we can call it lived experience knowledge. Um, and so in this example, there were certain experiences, like you're saying, that you could only have if you are in that community. There's certain experiences that you could only know of if you're living through that, site, right? Or one example that comes to mind is the situation where they had to, cement over some of the infrastructure because of the snakes that we're collecting up, right? And so that's a site-specific experience that's knowledge that's hard to, like, it's not academic based per se, but it's knowledge that you can get from folks who are living through that site, right? And so those considerations need to be a part of all of the considerations, right? With that being said, the expert knowledge I feel that is coming up is more so from like the academic standpoint, in regards to let's say how the infrastructure will be most stable, right? What type of maintenance requirements will be required for
Copy that.
Say it again. So yeah, what type of maintenance requirements? That's kind of like, let's say, your role as a landscape architect, designer, or architect. You would have that expert knowledge to bring to the conversation. And so being mindful of the difference between the two is important, and how they work together is critical, right? There isn't one that supersedes the other. It's more of like, how do you ensure that both of these knowledge uh, uh, points are coming together for the betterment of the project and its outcome?
Sounds good. Thank you.
No problem. Anybody else have questions before we break out into our discussion groups? All right, so while we're in these discussion groups, be sure to, talk amongst each other. You have access to the lecture and the video within it, so definitely, review as needed. But yeah, let's go ahead and get this done. We'll take about 20 minutes, come back at 8:05. Sergio, Rocio, did y'all have questions before you broke out to your groups?
Yeah, I actually did have a question. About like the discussion questions. If I heard correctly, obviously we have to do them, but we have to put them into like another site.
So on Canvas, the discussion questions are posted under the module.
Yeah.
It's listed in the lecture link, right? So on that lecture link, it's an upload option. So what you want to do is respond to the questions that are, that have been presented throughout this lecture, and upload it to that link. The questions are on that link as well as in the lecture.
Let's see. And the link, is it another website or
No,
what is it?
it's on Canvas. Canvas is the school platform for your class, the classes that you're registered on, and you go there to see the syllabus, the discussion board, any announcements from the course. Let me
Okay.
share my screen.
Yeah.
Just so you can see what I see. This is Canvas. It may look a little bit different on
Yeah.
your end, from the student perspective, but when you go to modules, every week there's a lecture posted.
Yeah.
And you'll see, like for this week, when you click the lecture, it has all the questions that we've talked about today so far. The class video reflection questions, the mutual reinforcement activity questions that we're talking through now. And then we'll have the constant communication questions that we'll get to right after this breakout group. And then you'll have link to the lecture here, as well as just a brief overview of what we'll discuss for that day. So this is a link that you can upload the response to these questions to.
And the link is it's the, let's see. So yeah, I think that's what part I was confused. Like the link, it's for the lecture notes, correct? So
Well, the lecture notes, yeah, the lecture notes is just reference for you to, oh, okay, this is what I'm following, whatever. But this link here is also, you should be able to upload your completed assignment to it, just like you do all of your other assignments.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a 25-point assignment, and you upload it to here.
Oh, okay, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I guess I was
And
confused because I saw something about like another link, but I just want to make sure though.
yeah, the other link
Yeah.
is just to show you the lecture that we've been going through. So the lecture will be available to you.
Oh, okay.
Because there's like the videos and things that you may want to reference.
All right. Just thank you.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
You know, if you have any other questions.
Thank you.
Rocio, do you have any questions? Any questions coming up for folks?
Not much. We're just going over the few of the questions, like the fourth question. So we're just kind of looking back at the video, just trying to get our notes together.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Manoa, what did you have for the challenges?
Any questions coming up for folks?
Can you repeat that?
Any questions coming up for anybody?
No, I don't think we have any questions right now.
Any questions coming up for anybody?
No, I'm all right.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Any questions coming up for anybody?
No, I don't think so. I think we kind of went over all of them.
Awesome. Awesome. Got about 5 more minutes. All right, we're just waiting for folks to get back. All right. So let's just get right into it for the sake of time. How did stakeholders in the case study coordinate their unique strengths to achieve the shared goal of this initiative? Group one, let's go ahead and have you respond to the first question. Who was a part of group one? You have Andre, Claudia, Dre, Nestor, Williams. Claudia, they coordinated by discussing what their needs were and applying the strengths stakeholders had, such as local and design knowledge, technological skills, and construction skills. They then applied their skills in the areas that would help progress the initiative. For example, while some people were designing and creating ideas for what to make, others had done crowdfunding to get materials for the actual project build. Great, great, great example, Claudia. Anybody else from group one want to add to that? Awesome. Thank you, Dre. Let's go to question number two. What specific roles or activities did different participants excel at, and how did these contributions complement the efforts of others in the collective impact project? Group number two, you want to respond to that question? We have Carla, Issy, Jonathan, Maya, Patty, and Rocio.
I can share.
Awesome.
So students served as researchers and designers and also fundraisers for the project. Community leaders served as facilitators and advocates for others in the community. And local residents held the tacit knowledge and shared that with the community.
Awesome, awesome. Great job, group number two. Let's move on to question number three. How did the case study ensure that the diverse actions of stakeholders remained aligned and coordinated toward a common agenda? Group number three, do you want to respond to that question?
I can go. I put that, or we put that, by developing a more like social and relaxed community engagement process, it allowed for many different edits and changes throughout to create the final plan. I think also having like a tangible, defined goal that we were able to come up with kind of helped to focus that engagement. And that once they kind of defined what that goal was, that they relied on the tacit knowledge of the community.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Rebecca, for your group. Bringing it home with question number four. What challenges did the stakeholders face in balancing their independent activities with the need for collaboration, and how were these challenges addressed? Group number four, do you want to go ahead and share out for that question?
Yeah, I'll do it. So what we found was that some of the challenges were like, at first there was some trouble with like collaboration, some funding, and materials. So for like collaboration, they basically went to like found community leaders like Sukumba, who like he was like basically helping them out by creating like networks for them. Well, connecting them to existing networks so that they're actually able to work with the community. they also for like materials, they use social media to solve that. So they basically started advertising and exposing them on media so that that way they could get like crowdfunding, and the wider community actually knew what they were doing so that they could also have help out. And then like from like building stuff, like during the building process, like they were making walls, and it turns out that one of the stakeholders told them that like those walls would basically help house snakes if they weren't done right. So he suggested that they use plaster to cover them so that there wouldn't be any holes for them to make houses. Those are a few of those like activities, and then yeah, so they just work together really. It was like really focusing on everybody participating at every time. So those were some of the few we found.
Indeed, indeed. I really like all the examples that you all shared. One of the examples that really stood out to me as well was really trying to uncover what the project priority would be. And there was this disconnect sometimes with the community in regards to them being able to communicate, let's say, a solution, but they understood some of the challenges they were experiencing. And so they identified, for example, electricity and the tap water, right? And the students were able to use their knowledge and education to identify an intervention, which was a tap water resource, right? And so I feel like that was a really great way for them to like learn that piece of understanding like who was doing what activity. So this idea of research and knowledge versus like the tacit knowledge of like lived experience of we need fresh water, right? And how do you match those two? So that was really another example of that as well. Yeah, so thank you all so much for sharing those amazing examples. Let's go ahead and go to the next part of this conversation, which is this idea of continuous communication. How did the residents nonprofit, all the stakeholders involved in this case study demonstrate a commitment to long-term collaboration and trust building? What strategies were used in the case study to maintain regular engagement and foster mutual understanding among participants over time? In what ways did the case study address the challenge of aligning different motivations and interests between stakeholders? And how did the case study participants overcome initial barriers to trust? And what were the key turning points that helped strengthen the collaboration? Right? Okay, so these are the next set of questions that we'll be doing a breakout group to discuss. Again, make sure that you're discussing amongst each other, and we'll come back to go over this share out with these questions. And then I want to briefly go over the assignment that you will have this week. And then we'll be done for today. Sounds good? So we'll do another 20-minute breakout session responding to these questions. Let me go ahead and get these breakout groups going. Those rooms are open back up. We'll take about 20 minutes and then we'll be back together. All right, so folks should be back. Let's jump right into it. Group number one. Entree, Claudia, Dre, Roman, Dre, Nestor, Williams. How did the residents or other stakeholders, agencies involved in the case study demonstrate a commitment to long-term collaboration? I see that Claudia responded in the chat. They demonstrated a commitment to long-term by engaging with the needs of the community, providing resources to ensure that the project would have long-term benefits, and having on-site participation that shows their commitment or support for the initiative. Residents were able to share their input on how the community currently functions and what they would like to see in the future. The nonprofits and businesses donated resources to the project for it to be professionally done in order to have a lasting structure. I think the transparency regarding their goals, resources, and expectations helped establish the commitment to long-term collaboration and trust building. Thank you for that response, group number one. I think it was like, they mentioned it was like a long time of them like building this effort out. Let's go to question number two. What strategies were used in the case study to maintain regular engagement and foster mutual understanding among participants over time? We have Carla, Issy, Jonathan, Maya, Patty, Rocio. Who wants to jump in there and respond to question number two?
We identified charrettes as kind of an important strategy to maintain regular engagement. They used model building and walking the site with the residents to kind of investigate needs and preferences. And then, yeah, using that charrette kind of structure to incorporate local construction knowledge and other kind of tacit network resources.
Awesome. Thank you, Issy, for that response. I see Maya also added in the chat, social media to show progress and help raise funds, charrettes to discuss design decisions, and relying on community leaders to engage community members. Yes, thank you both for your responses to question number two. Let's go to question number three. In what ways did the case study address the challenges of aligning different motivation and interests between stakeholders? Group number three, who's responding to that?
I could answer it. So we say initially the students took more of like an academic approach to it, just based off of like their studies and stuff. But so this kind of like conveyed with the impression more of like aesthetics with like the rock wall that they wanted to build, but they found out through like communication with the community that this wall was actually be a habitat for snakes. And just with that, without the clear communication, they wouldn't understand what the community needs are, because based off the students' research, it might only be like, say, like a few months or maybe even weeks of research, while many of these community members have either been living there for generations or long enough to understand like where they live and what happens.
Indeed, indeed. And that's critical, right? That's super, super critical. It's one thing to have something that's aesthetically pleasing, but function is what's most important with design, right? So it's important that it has a function that's usable and doesn't put the community at risk. Let's go with question number four. How did the case study participants overcome initial barriers to trust, and what were key turning points that helped strengthen collaboration? Group number four, who's responding to that? We have
I can go.
Okay.
Yeah, so for the first part about overcoming initial barriers, so they said that like at first when they were talking with the community, they went with like introductory games, so kind of like something more formal. But then they found out that being like more socially interactive with them and actually speaking to them about like just having conversations with them and socially being engaged, that actually was way more helpful to them and actually gave them more input than the first like textbook style of just formally introducing themselves. And then for the second part, some of the key turning points were again like meeting key leaders like Skamba, who like because of him, their project really got off on a good start. And also helping develop the tap water system also was a really big key turning point, because that was like something tangible that people really saw the results of. And so they were like made them believe that, okay, yeah, we can continue in this, like this is working. Yeah, I think that helped strengthen the collaboration within them, because they knew that on both sides they were both participating and giving, bringing in effort and results.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you so much for sharing that. Great participation within these activities. Did you all enjoy working through those case studies with these questions? Thumbs up for folks. Yeah. Enjoyed that. I see a couple of thumbs. All right, cool. I see some thumbs. This is really critical, right? To identify these key components of best practices, because again, when you all are implementing your projects, you definitely want to incorporate some of these ideas. And some of these may resonate with you in regards to your capacity or even interest, but definitely want to leverage some of these tools that we're engaging with for this, right? And working through these case studies is a great way to figure out, like, how do we see these best practices using the frameworks that we're learning about when we're talking about collective impact. Another thing that I want to do before I let you all go is quickly go over the assignment that you all have for this week. Let's see how so. So, as you all know, with this class, I'm posting projects and assignments by module. So when you go to your module tab, you can see all of the weeks for this semester so far. I do want to confirm that the way that the class is organized is helpful. I know I'm trying to be as organized as possible. I know there's been a couple of issues, for example, with the publishing of the modules, but outside of that, are you all okay with how the class has been organized so far? Are there any challenges coming up for you all in regards to accessing the information or completing the assignments? All right, cool. Definitely let me know if some challenges are coming up. But again, you just come to the module section, you'll have a lecture. Sometimes there's an additional assignment like the reading and research assignments that you'll be having. This week, you're assigned a design research framework assignment. And so that's what I want to quickly go over with you all. So using the case study from the lecture, again, the video that we watched and worked through with the questions for collective impact, you're going to use that same video to work through this week's assignment using the design research framework tool. You'll need to identify both constraints and interests for your relevant stakeholders around the key areas of socio-economic, environmental, and socio-political. And this political one is more, you could say, leadership. In this context, it's not necessarily like zoning plans or anything like that, but there is like a community structure of leadership and authority, and you can really evaluate that lens through that kind of framework, using this framework. Be sure to explore how each of these areas influence the design process and how stakeholders' engagement shapes the outcomes. This assignment is designed to gain awareness on research framework and approaches. Each student will use the case study and complete the design research framework assignment. Each student will need to identify both constraints and interests, right? So can you all still see my screen?
Yes.
Did it go to the Google Doc?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the design research framework tool. So you'll use this to categorize your takeaways from the information that you've gathered from the case study. So there's certain design constraints, policy constraints, and financial constraints in relation to the environment, leadership, and economic opportunities. So you really want to spell that out in context of what the video is communicating, right? And then when you go to this right side of the conversation, okay, so the left side is site specific, right? What are some socio-environmental challenges, socio-political challenges, and socio-economic challenges that are site specific? And then you want to get into the community vision. What are some of the interests and values that are coming up related to socio-environmental, socio-political, and socio-economic for the stakeholders? So we have here the community. So that's going to be a community stakeholder that's already accounted for, but there may be other stakeholder groups that you want to identify, and you can put those stakeholders here. And again, you want to identify the constraints and considerations across these key areas. And then again, on the right side, you're really speaking to the vision and interest of the stakeholders across those key areas. Again, you want to be thinking about what we've been learning about evaluating these case studies. We've gone through a few case studies over these last couple of weeks. And this is a research framework tool that you can use to, again, dissect these case studies and organize the information that you're gathering. What you ultimately will do is prepare a PowerPoint presentation with your key findings, okay? So however you want to prepare that PowerPoint with your key findings using this tool, you'll be able to upload it with this tool onto the Canvas link here. So you want to, again, fill in this tool, complete the PowerPoint for this assignment, and upload it here. Are there any questions regarding this assignment or task? All right, so now you're going to be, again, starting to use these tools that we've been introducing and applying it to these different case studies that we'll be coming across. And so this is your first assignment related to using the research tool. So I'm looking forward to seeing how you all leverage this tool to execute this task. But if any questions come up, do not hesitate to reach out. That concludes today's session. I hope you all had another wonderful session, a lecture today in this course this fall semester. And I'll be on for about 5 minutes for anyone who needs to stick behind to ask any questions.
Thank you, Professor.
Very welcome. You're very welcome.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Professor. All right, you all have a great evening. You're very welcome.